The worn-out sneakers squeaked against the cracked asphalt as 12-year-old Marcus Johnson dribbled his basketball in the narrow alley behind his grandmother's apartment building in Oakland, California. The sound echoed between the weathered brick walls, mixing with the distant hum of traffic from International Boulevard and the rhythmic clatter of the BART train that passed every 20 minutes. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his threadbare Golden State Warriors t-shirt, a hand-me-down from his older cousin that had seen better days 3 years ago. The fabric was so thin you could almost see through it, and the team logo had faded to a ghost of its former vibrant blue and gold. But to Marcus, it might as well have been made of gold. "Marcus, dinner!" his grandmother's voice called from the third-floor window, cutting through the evening air thick with the scent of nearby food trucks and the distant fog rolling in from San Francisco Bay. "5 more minutes, Grandma Rose," he called back, not breaking his rhythm. Dribble, crossover, pull-up jumper against the faded chalk outline he'd drawn on the brick wall months ago. Swish, at least in his imagination. Rose Johnson appeared at the window, her silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight filtering through the urban canyon. At 68, she'd raised 3 children of her own, and now found herself raising her grandson after his mother struggled with addiction, and his father had never been in the picture. Her Social Security check and part-time job cleaning offices barely covered rent and groceries, but she'd never let Marcus go without the essentials, even if luxuries were just dreams. "That boy's gonna wear holes in those shoes before winter," she muttered to herself, watching Marcus practice the same moves he'd seen Stephen Curry execute during Warriors games they'd watched together on their old television set. The antenna had to be adjusted just right to get a clear picture, but they never missed a home game. Marcus had discovered basketball 3 years ago when a community center volunteer brought a rack of balls to the after-school program. While other kids his age were gravitating toward video games or getting caught up in the street life that claimed too many young people in their neighborhood, Marcus found something different in the rhythm of the bounce, the arc of a perfect shot, the way the game seemed to slow down when everything clicked. But it wasn't just basketball that captured his heart. It was Stephen Curry. Watching Curry play was like watching magic, but not the impossible kind. It was the magic of hard work, of someone who didn't look like the typical NBA superstar, but had transformed himself into something extraordinary through dedication and an unshakable belief in his abilities. At 6'3", and with a slender build, Curry proved that you didn't need to be the biggest or strongest to dominate. You needed to be the smartest, the most prepared, and the most relentless. "He's just like us," Marcus had told his grandmother one evening after watching Curry drain 7 three-pointers against the Lakers. "He's not the biggest guy out there, but he works harder than everyone else." Rose had smiled, recognizing something profound in her grandson's observation. Marcus wasn't just watching basketball. He was studying it, learning from it, finding hope in it. The apartment they shared was small, just 2 bedrooms with paper-thin walls where you could hear Mrs. Chen's television next door and the Rodriguez family's baby crying down the hall. The kitchen had a refrigerator that hummed too loudly and a stove where only 3 burners worked. The living room furniture came from garage sales and community donations, mismatched but clean and arranged with the pride that comes from making the best of what you have. But despite the financial struggles, Rose had created a home filled with love, structure, and unwavering support. For Marcus's dreams, she'd wake up at 5 a.m. to catch 2 buses to her cleaning job downtown, work 8 hours scrubbing office buildings, then catch those same 2 buses home to help Marcus with homework, and make dinner from whatever ingredients she could stretch to last the week. "Basketball might be your passion," she'd often tell him while they ate dinner at their small table, "but education is your foundation. You build a house from the ground up, not from the roof down." Marcus understood the wisdom in her words, maintaining a 3.7 GPA at Roosevelt Middle School while spending every free moment practicing basketball. His teachers noticed his dedication, the way he'd finish assignments quickly so he could sketch basketball plays in the margins of his notebooks, how he'd incorporate basketball statistics into math problems when given the choice for projects. His social studies teacher, Mr. Harrison, had been particularly supportive. A former college player himself, he recognized the fire in Marcus's eyes and the intelligence behind his basketball obsession. He'd sometimes stay after school to rebound for Marcus in the gym, offering encouragement and life lessons disguised as basketball advice. Curry didn't make his high school varsity team as a freshman, Mr. Harrison had shared one afternoon. Sometimes the path to greatness looks different than you expect. The key is never giving up on yourself, even when others can't see your potential yet. That lesson had stuck with Marcus through the long Oakland nights when he'd practice alone in the alley, through the mornings when he'd wake up early to shoot around at the local park before school, through the moments when kids at school would tease him about his worn-out gear or his grandmother's old car that sometimes wouldn't start. The basketball he dribbled wasn't new. The leather was scuffed and the lines had faded, but Rose had found it at a thrift store for $5 and presented it to him like it was made of platinum. Marcus had cried that day, not from sadness but from the overwhelming gratitude of being seen and supported by someone who believed in his dreams even when they seemed impossible. As the evening light faded and the street lights began to flicker on, Marcus took one final shot at his imaginary hoop. In his mind, it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. The score was tied, and he was Stephen Curry bringing the championship home to the Bay Area. The shot went up in a perfect arc, and in his heart, it was nothing but net. "Coming, Grandma," he called, tucking the ball under his arm and heading toward the apartment building's entrance. The elevator had been broken for 6 months, so he took the stairs 2 at a time, his footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. As he climbed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something special was coming. He didn't know what or when, but he felt it in the way the basketball felt perfect in his hands, in the way his shots had been falling. More consistently, in the way his grandmother smiled when she watched him play. He was about to discover that sometimes the universe has a way of rewarding those who never stop believing in themselves. 3 weeks later, Marcus stared at the colorful flyer in his hands, reading it for the 5th time as if the words might change. The paper trembled slightly in his grip, not from the cool October morning breeze that swept across the Roosevelt Middle School courtyard, but from the electricity of possibility coursing through his 12-year-old body. "Golden State Warriors Community Outreach Event," the header announced in bold blue and gold letters. "Meet your favorite players. Free basketball clinic. Prizes and giveaways. Saturday, October 28th, 10 a.m., 2 p.m., Oakland Community Center." At the bottom, in smaller print but no less significant to Marcus, it read, "Special appearance by Stephen Curry and other Warriors stars." "You gonna stand there all day staring at that paper, or you gonna tell me what's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" asked Jamal, Marcus's best friend, as he approached from the bike racks. Jamal Rodriguez had been Marcus's closest friend since 3rd grade, when they'd both been the smallest kids in their class and naturally gravitated toward each other for protection and companionship. Where Marcus was reserved and focused, Jamal was outgoing and quick with jokes. Where Jamal sometimes let his attention wander, Marcus kept him grounded and focused on their studies. They balanced each other perfectly. "Look at this," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper as he handed over the flyer. Jamal's eyes widened as he read. "Bro, this is huge! We have to go." "We?" Marcus asked, hope creeping into his voice. "Of course we. You think I'm gonna let you meet Steph Curry without me? Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't faint when you see him." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's automatic inclusion of himself in the plan. That was Jamal. Loyal to the core, always ready to support his friend's dreams as if they were his own. But the community center. Marcus's voice trailed off as the reality of the situation began to set in. The Oakland Community Center was in a different part of town. Not dangerous, but definitely not their neighborhood. It would require bus fare they didn't have, and time away from the responsibilities that filled their weekends. Marcus spent most Saturdays helping his grandmother, with laundry at the laundromat, grocery shopping with carefully clipped coupons, and doing odd jobs around their apartment building for Mrs. Patterson, the elderly landlord who paid him $20 to clean the lobby and take out the trash. "My mom can drive us," Jamal offered, seeming to read his friend's thoughts. "She's been wanting to do something nice for you anyway. Last week, she told my dad that you're the best influence I've ever had." Maria Rodriguez had indeed taken a special interest in Marcus over the years. As a single mother working as a nurse at Oakland Children's Hospital, she understood the challenges of raising a child with limited resources. She'd watched Marcus's quiet determination and impeccable manners, the way he always thanked her when she included him in family dinners or movie nights, the way he looked after Jamal like a protective older brother, even though they were the same age. "You sure she won't mind?" Marcus asked. "Are you kidding? She'll probably want to get Curry's autograph for herself. She's always talking about how much she respects him for his community work and how he represents the Bay Area." That afternoon, Marcus practically floated through his classes. In English, while Mrs. Patterson discussed character development in their current novel, Marcus was imagining what he might say to Stephen Curry if he got the chance to speak to him. In math, while working through algebraic equations, he was calculating the probability of actually getting close enough to his idol to have a meaningful interaction. By the time he got home, he had rehearsed dozens of scenarios in his head. He'd introduce himself, mention that he'd been practicing Curry's shooting form, maybe ask for advice about improving his ball-handling skills. He'd be respectful and brief. He understood that there would probably be hundreds of kids there, all wanting the same opportunity. "Grandma Rose, you'll never believe what happened today," he announced, as he burst through the apartment door, his backpack hitting the floor with unusual carelessness. Rose looked up from the kitchen table where she was organizing pills into weekly containers. Her own medications and those of 3 elderly neighbors she helped manage their prescriptions for a few extra dollars each month. "Well, judging by that smile, it must be something pretty special," she said, setting down the pill bottle and giving him her full attention. Marcus handed her the flyer, watching her face as she read. Rose's expression shifted from curiosity to understanding to concern. The same progression of emotions Marcus had experienced, but with the added weight of an adult's perspective on logistics and practicalities. "This is wonderful, baby," she said carefully. "When is it?" "This Saturday. And Jamal's mom said she can drive us. I won't need any money, and I'll still help you with everything on Sunday instead." Rose studied her grandson's face, seeing the hope and excitement that radiated from every feature. She thought about the $20 she'd set aside for winter clothes from the thrift store, the grocery budget that was already stretched thin, the electricity bill that was due next week. Then she looked at the flyer again, at the pure joy in Marcus's eyes, and made the kind of decision that grandmothers make when love trumps logic. "You know what? I think I might want to come along too," she said. Marcus's jaw dropped. "Really? Really? I've been hearing about this Stephen Curry fellow for 3 years now. Maybe it's time I see what all the fuss is about." What Marcus didn't know was that Rose had been setting aside $5 here and there from her cleaning jobs, hiding it in an old coffee can behind the flour container. She'd been saving for Marcus's birthday in December, hoping to get him a new basketball, or maybe some proper basketball shoes. This seemed like a better use of that money. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation. Marcus practiced harder than ever in the alley, imagining that Stephen Curry might somehow see him play and offer encouragement or advice. He researched everything he could about Curry's community work, his family, his journey from a relatively unknown college player to NBA superstar. He learned that Curry had been involved in numerous charitable initiatives, from providing clean water to communities in need to supporting education programs for underprivileged children. He read about Curry's own challenges growing up as the son of an NBA player, the pressure he'd faced, the way he'd turned criticism and doubts into motivation. "He's not just a great player," Marcus told Jamal during lunch on Friday. "He's a great person. Did you know he personally funded renovations for basketball courts in Oakland? And he's building a golf course designed specifically to introduce the game to kids who normally wouldn't have access to it?" Jamal nodded, but he was more interested in the basketball clinic aspect of the event. "Think they'll actually let us play with them? Or just watch?" The flyer says clinic, so probably some kind of instruction. Maybe we'll get to scrimmage or do drills. Man, imagine blocking one of Steph Curry's shots, Jamal said with a grin. Imagine making a shot that Steph Curry rebounds for you, Marcus countered. They spent the lunch period trading increasingly elaborate fantasies about the event, each scenario more unlikely than the last, but all of them rooted in the very real possibility that they were about to meet their hero. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his grandmother's soft snoring coming through the thin wall between their bedrooms. The flyer was on his nightstand, and he could just make out its outline in the darkness. Tomorrow everything could change. Tomorrow he might shake hands with the person who had inspired him to believe that greatness wasn't about where you came from or what you looked like. It was about how hard you were willing to work and how much you believed in yourself. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind was already at the community center, already living the moment he'd dreamed about for years. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Oakland that made the city look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Marcus had been awake since 5:30 a.m., too excited to sleep, quietly practicing his introduction to Stephen Curry in the bathroom mirror while trying not to wake his grandmother. "Hi, Mr. Curry, I'm Marcus Johnson. I've been watching you play since I was 9, and you've taught me that size doesn't matter if you have heart and work ethic." Too formal. "What's up, Steph? I'm your biggest fan." Too casual. "Mr. Curry, I practice your shooting form every day in the alley behind my apartment. Could you watch me shoot once and tell me what I'm doing wrong?" Better. But what if there wasn't time for that? By 8 a.m. he'd settled on simply introducing himself and asking for an autograph, maybe a quick photo if the opportunity presented itself. Keep it simple. Be respectful. Don't take up too much of his time. Rose had prepared a small breakfast of oatmeal and orange juice, stretching their weekly grocery budget to include the orange juice as a special treat for the special day. She watched Marcus eat, noting how he kept checking the time on their old microwave clock every few minutes. "You nervous, baby?" she asked, settling into her chair with her own bowl. "A little," Marcus admitted. "What if I can't think of what to say? What if there are so many people that I don't even get close to him?" "Then you'll have the experience of being in the same room as someone who inspires you," Rose said practically. "Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just seeing that your heroes are real people, just like you, is the most valuable thing you can learn." At 9:15, Maria Rodriguez knocked on their door. She was dressed in her best casual clothes, dark jeans and a Warriors hoodie she'd borrowed from Jamal, her long black hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. As a nurse, she understood the importance of community health initiatives, and she was genuinely excited to see the Warriors outreach program in action. "You ready for this, superstar?" she asked Marcus, ruffling his carefully combed hair. "More ready than I've ever been for anything," he replied. The drive to the Oakland Community Center took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that told the story of the city's diversity and complexity. They passed pristine blocks of newly renovated homes where tech workers were moving in, then turned onto streets where boarded-up storefronts stood next to family-owned businesses that had been serving the community for decades. As they got closer to the community center, the signs of the event became visible. Orange traffic cones directed cars toward temporary parking areas. Volunteers and Warriors T-shirts guided families toward the entrance. A small crowd was already forming despite the early hour. "Look at all these people," Jamal said, pressing his face to the car window. Marcus felt his stomach flutter with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He'd imagined this moment so many times, but he'd always pictured a smaller, more intimate setting where he might have a real conversation with Stephen Curry. The reality was beginning to set in. This was going to be a big event with lots of people who all wanted the same thing he did. The Oakland Community Center was a single-story brick building that served as a hub for neighborhood activities. It housed a gymnasium, several multi-purpose rooms, a kitchen for community meals, and outdoor basketball courts that had seen better days but were still functional. Today, the entire facility had been transformed. Warriors banners hung from light poles. Registration tables manned by volunteers wearing bright yellow T-shirts were set up near the entrance. The parking lot buzzed with families unloading folding chairs and coolers, kids dribbling basketballs, teenagers wearing every iteration of Warriors jerseys from the past decade. "Okay, here's the plan," Maria said as she found a parking spot 2 blocks away. "We stick together, we're polite and patient, and we remember that everyone here is excited to be here, just like us." As they walked toward the community center, Marcus noticed the diversity of the crowd. Families who looked like they could afford courtside seats mixed with others who, like them, had clearly made this event a significant investment of time and resources. Kids wearing brand-new Warriors gear stood next to others in hand-me-down clothes and worn sneakers. The common thread was the excitement in everyone's eyes, the same look Marcus had been wearing all week. "Registration!" called a volunteer as they approached the entrance. "Everyone needs to sign in and get a wristband." The process was efficient, but slow-moving due to the volume of people. Marcus used the wait time to scan the crowd, looking for any signs of the Warriors players. He knew from following the team's social media that they typically arrived at community events around the scheduled start time, making grand entrances that generated excitement and photo opportunities. "Marcus Johnson," he told the volunteer when it was his turn. "Great, here's your wristband and your event schedule," she said, handing him a yellow paper, bracelet, and a folded program. "The basketball clinic starts at 10:30 in the main gym. Photos and autographs are scheduled throughout the event at different stations. Have fun." Marcus studied the schedule as they entered the building. The main gym would host the basketball clinic. The multi-purpose rooms had been set up for different activities: a healthy eating demonstration, a financial literacy workshop for parents, and various games and activities for younger children. But the item that made his heart race was listed at the bottom: meet and greet with Warriors players. Throughout the event, locations will be announced. "They're here!" Jamal suddenly exclaimed, pointing toward the gymnasium entrance. Marcus looked up to see a small commotion near the gym doors. Security personnel in dark polo shirts were setting up stanchions and rope lines. Event staff were testing microphones and adjusting portable speakers. And then he saw him. Stephen Curry emerged from a side entrance, recognizable instantly despite being dressed casually in Warriors warm-up gear rather than his game uniform. He was smaller than Marcus had expected. Not short, but not imposing in the way you might imagine a professional athlete would be. What struck Marcus immediately was how normal he looked, how approachable. Curry was followed by several other Warriors players and team staff, but Marcus only had eyes for his idol, the man who had inspired countless hours of practice, who had showed him that greatness came in different packages, who had taught him that basketball was as much about character as it was about skill. "There he is," Marcus whispered, not trusting his voice to speak louder. Rose squeezed his shoulder. "Go on, baby. This is your moment." But as Marcus started to move toward the gymnasium, he noticed something that made his chest tighten with anxiety. The security personnel were creating clear boundaries around the players. Rope lines established a perimeter. Staff members were positioning themselves to control access. This wasn't going to be as simple as walking up and introducing himself. The reality of the situation began to settle over Marcus like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just a community event. It was a carefully orchestrated public relations opportunity with protocols, procedures, and professional management. The Warriors organization had systems in place to manage interactions with fans, especially young fans. He was going to have to wait his turn like everyone else. He was going to have to hope that when his moment came, he'd be ready for it. As he stood there, watching his hero interact with other children and families, Marcus felt the weight of his grandmother's sacrifice, of Maria's kindness in driving them, of his own 3 years of dreams and preparation. This was his chance. He just had to figure out how to make the most of it. The basketball clinic was everything Marcus had hoped it would be and more. For 45 minutes, he found himself in the same gymnasium as Stephen Curry, listening to his voice give instruction, watching his hands demonstrate proper shooting form, observing the way he interacted with each child who approached him during the drills. Curry moved through the crowd of young players with natural ease, offering encouragement, correcting technique with gentle patience, and maintaining the kind of positive energy that made everyone around him feel special. Marcus participated in every drill, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor as he worked to impress not just his hero, but himself. "Nice form," Curry had called out during the shooting drill when Marcus sank 3 consecutive shots from the free throw line. It wasn't a personal conversation, just a coach's acknowledgement of good technique, but Marcus felt like he could have floated to the ceiling. As the clinic wound down, the event staff began organizing the meet and greet portion of the day. This was what most families had really come for: the chance to get autographs, take photos, and have a brief personal interaction with the Warriors players. The system was methodical. Families were organized into groups based on their wristband colors. Each group would have 10 minutes with the players at different stations set up around the community center. Security personnel maintained clear boundaries, ensuring orderly lines and managing the flow of people. Marcus's group, the yellow wristbands, was scheduled for the third rotation. As he waited with Rose, Jamal, and Maria, he watched the first 2 groups cycle through their opportunities. Some kids were confident, walking right up to Curry with practiced ease. Others were shy, hiding behind their parents until Curry's warm smile drew them out. Every interaction seemed meaningful. Curry wasn't rushing anyone, wasn't going through the motions. He was present for each person, asking names, making genuine conversation, creating moments that these kids would remember forever. "Yellow wristbands," an event coordinator called out. "You're up." Marcus's heart began to race as his group moved toward the main meet and greet station, where Curry was signing basketballs and posing for photos. The line moved steadily but not quickly. Curry was taking time with each family, and Marcus appreciated that, even as his anxiety built. When there were only 3 families ahead of him, Marcus began to prepare mentally. He would introduce himself, mention that he'd been practicing Curry's shooting techniques, ask for an autograph on the basketball he'd brought from home, and maybe request a quick photo if time permitted. 2 families ahead. Marcus could hear Curry's voice now, close enough to make out individual words. He was talking to a little girl about her basketball team, asking about her favorite position, encouraging her to keep practicing. 1 family ahead. Marcus gripped his basketball tighter, the familiar texture of the worn leather providing comfort. Rose squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. Jamal gave him a thumbs up, and then it was his turn. Marcus stepped forward, his mouth opening to deliver the introduction he'd been practicing all week, when suddenly a large hand landed on his chest, stopping him in his tracks. "Whoa there, kid," said a security guard, a tall man in a dark polo shirt with "security" emblazoned across the back. "The line ends here for now. We need to take a break." "But I'm next," Marcus said, confusion evident in his voice. "I have a yellow wristband." The security guard barely glanced at Marcus's wristband. His eyes swept over Marcus's appearance. The faded Warriors t-shirt, the worn sneakers with duct tape holding the sole together on the left foot, the basketball that had obviously seen years of use. "Sorry, kid, Mr. Curry needs a break. You'll have to wait for the next session." "When is the next session?" Rose asked, stepping forward with the protective instinct of a grandmother who sensed something wasn't right. "We'll make an announcement," the guard replied dismissively, his attention already shifting away from them. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. He watched as other families who had arrived after him, families whose children wore expensive new gear and carried professional-looking cameras, were allowed to continue approaching Curry. "That's not fair," Jamal said, his voice rising with indignation. "Marcus has been waiting longer than those kids. Is there a problem here?" asked another security guard, approaching their group. The first guard gestured toward Marcus and his family, just keeping the line organized. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, a combination of embarrassment and growing realization. He looked down at his clothes, at his grandmother's worn coat, at the contrast between his family and the others who were being allowed to continue meeting Curry. "Come on, baby," Rose said quietly, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Let's go sit down for a minute." But Marcus couldn't move. He was frozen in place, watching as his moment slipped away. 3 years of dreams, weeks of anticipation, hours of practice and preparation, all of it evaporating because someone had decided he didn't look like he belonged. The security guard's hand was still on his chest, not pushing but maintaining pressure, a clear message that he should step back. Marcus could see Stephen Curry just 10 feet away, completely unaware of what was happening at the edge of his interaction space. "Please," Marcus said, his voice smaller than he intended. "I just want to get an autograph. I've been practicing his shooting form for 3 years. I just want to tell him thank you." "I understand, kid, but you need to wait for the next opportunity," the guard said, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. Marcus felt tears threatening to form behind his eyes, and he blinked rapidly to keep them from falling. He wouldn't cry here, not in front of everyone, not when his grandmother had sacrificed to make this day possible. But as he started to turn away, something unexpected happened. Stephen Curry's voice cut through the ambient noise of the event. "Excuse me, what's going on over here?" The security guards turned, suddenly standing straighter as they realized their client was addressing them. "Just managing the line, Mr. Curry," the first guard explained. "Making sure everything stays organized." Curry looked past the guards to Marcus, taking in his appearance, his expression, the basketball clutched in his hands. His eyes, which had been warm and friendly all morning, grew serious. "What's your name?" Curry asked, addressing Marcus directly. Marcus Johnson," he stuttered, hardly believing that Stephen Curry was speaking to him. "How long have you been waiting, Marcus?" "Since my group was called." "Yellow wristbands." Curry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked at the security guards, then back at Marcus, and something shifted in his demeanor. "Gentlemen," he said to the security team, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority, "I need to speak with Marcus here. Can you give us some space?" The guards looked uncertain. "Sir, we're just trying to maintain—" "I understand your job," Curry interrupted, still speaking calmly but with a firmness that left no room for argument. "And I'm telling you that this young man is my priority right now. Please step back." The security guards exchanged glances and reluctantly moved away, though they remained close enough to intervene if needed. Curry approached Marcus, closing the distance that the guards had been enforcing. He was now close enough that Marcus could see the genuine concern in his eyes, could hear the slight edge in his voice that suggested controlled anger. "Marcus," Curry said, kneeling down to get closer to Marcus's eye level, "I'm sorry about that. That should never have happened to you or your family." Marcus felt his composure finally crack, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, of being treated with the respect and kindness he'd dreamed about. "I just wanted to meet you," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I practice your shots every day in the alley behind my apartment. My grandma saved up money so we could come here today." Curry glanced over at Rose, who was watching the interaction with fierce pride and barely contained emotion. He stood up and walked over to her. "Ma'am, I'm Stephen Curry," he said, extending his hand, "and I owe you an apology for how your grandson was just treated." Rose shook his hand, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I'm Rose Johnson, and this is my grandson Marcus. He's been talking about meeting you for 3 years." "Well then," Curry said, turning back to Marcus with a smile that seemed to light up the entire corner of the room, "I'd say we have some catching up to do." What happened next would be talked about in the Johnson household for years to come, shared with neighbors and friends, and remembered by Marcus every time he faced a moment when he needed to believe in the goodness of people. Stephen Curry spent the next 20 minutes with Marcus, not the usual 2-minute meet and greet, but a genuine conversation. He asked about Marcus's basketball practice, his school, his dreams. He watched Marcus demonstrate his shooting form and offered specific technical advice. He signed not just Marcus's basketball, but also took a photo with him, Rose, Jamal, and Maria that would become the centerpiece of their living room wall. But more than that, he pulled Marcus aside for a private moment. "Marcus," he said, "I want you to remember something. What happened here today with those security guards, that was wrong. But don't let other people's limitations become your limitations. You keep working hard. You keep believing in yourself, And you don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong somewhere. He reached into his bag and pulled out a pair of his signature basketball shoes. Not the game-worn ones, but a brand-new pair in Marcus's size that he'd brought for situations exactly like this. "These are for you," he said. "But they come with a responsibility. Every time you put them on, I want you to remember that kindness matters more than talent, character matters more than ability, and that the best players are the ones who lift other people up." As they prepared to leave the community center, Marcus walked differently. It wasn't just the new shoes, though they fit perfectly and felt like clouds on his feet. It was the knowledge that his hero had not only lived up to his expectations, but had exceeded them in ways he never could have imagined. Rose linked her arm through Marcus's as they walked to Maria's car, both of them carrying something more valuable than autographs or photos. "You know what I learned today?" Marcus asked his grandmother. "What's that, baby?" "I learned that being great isn't just about what you do with a basketball. It's about what you do when you have the power to help someone else." Rose smiled, knowing that her grandson had learned something that would shape not just his basketball career, but his character for the rest of his life. As they drove home through the Oakland streets, Marcus stared out the window at his city with new eyes. He still had the same dreams, the same determination to work hard and improve his game. But now he also had something else, a clear understanding of the kind of person he wanted to become when his own dreams came true. The boy who had entered the community center hoping to meet his hero left knowing that he had the power to become someone else's hero someday. And in the alley behind his grandmother's apartment building that evening, as he practiced his shooting form in his new shoes, Marcus made a promise to himself. Someday, when he had the platform and the power to make a difference, he would remember what it felt like to be pushed aside. And he would make sure no kid ever felt that way again. The basketball swished through his imaginary hoop, and Marcus smiled, knowing that some dreams are just the beginning of bigger dreams. Some moments change everything. This was one of them.